The massive council chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with panic and fear. Representatives from 300 different alien worlds sat in their assigned seats, all talking at once. Their voices created a noise that filled the enormous room like angry insects. Ambassador Zektar stood at the center podium, his green scaly hands shaking as he held the datapad. The numbers on the screen made his stomach turn cold. 17 star systems gone, billions of lives lost, their combined military forces reduced to almost nothing. Silence, he called out, but his voice cracked. The talking continued. Silence, he shouted this time, and the chamber finally grew quiet. Elder Counselor Vexani rose from her crystal throne. Her body looked like living glass, and light passed through her in strange patterns. Ambassador Zektar, please share the latest intelligence. Reports. Zektar activated the holographic display above the chamber. Images of destroyed worlds appeared in the air above their heads. Planets that once held cities and farms now looked like burned rocks floating in space. The Void Wraiths have consumed the Outer Rim territories completely, he began. They move faster than our scouts predicted. Their weapons turn everything into dust and shadows. Commander Thylos of the Avian Republic spread his feathered wings in distress. How many ships do we have left? 12% of our original fleet strength, Zektar replied. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 12%, whispered Dr. Keln from the hegemony worlds. Out of 10,000 ships, we have barely 1,000 left. The chamber erupted again. Some delegates stood and shouted. Others sat in stunned silence. A few began making plans to evacuate their home worlds. Vexani raised her hand for quiet. There must be something we can do. Some weapon we haven't tried. Some strategy we haven't considered. We have tried everything, Zektar said, his voice heavy with defeat. Energy weapons feed them and make them stronger. Kinetic projectiles bounce off their hulls like toys. Nuclear weapons just give them more power to absorb. What about the ancient weapons? Asked Senator Morvek from the Trisolar Alliance. The legends speak of devices that could destroy entire star systems. Legends, Zektar replied. We found nothing in the archives, no super weapons, no forgotten technology. Nothing that could stop them. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Many delegates stared at their hands or the floor. Others looked at the images of dead worlds still floating above them. There is one option, Zektar said quietly. The chamber became so quiet that they could hear the ventilation systems humming in the walls. The Death World species, the ones from Sol 3, the humans. A collective gasp ran through the assembly. Several delegates actually left their seats and backed away, as if just hearing. The name was dangerous. You cannot be serious, Thylos said, his voice barely above a whisper. Absolutely not, declared Ambassador Hex from the core worlds. They are monsters. Savages. We quarantined their system for good reason. Zektar activated another holographic display. This time, images from Earth's history filled the chamber. Ancient human warriors with primitive weapons. Soldiers fighting in terrible conditions. Battles that lasted for years without stopping. Look at their military history, he said. They have been fighting wars for their entire existence as a species. Not just fighting, but perfecting the art of destruction. The images changed. Human soldiers charging through poison gas clouds, naval battles in frozen oceans, aircraft diving into enemy ships on purpose. They fight in conditions that would kill any of us instantly, Zektar continued. They create weapons designed not just to kill, but to cause pain and fear. They have strategies based on how many of their own people they are willing to lose. This is exactly why we avoid them, Vexani said. They are too dangerous to contact. But that might be exactly why we need them now, Zektar replied. Intelligence reports show they have advanced beyond their primitive nuclear weapons. They have developed space travel, energy manipulation, and advanced computing systems. Commander, Thylos shook his head. Even if they could help us, why would they? They have no reason to care about our survival. Because the Void Wraiths will not stop with us, Dr. Keln said slowly. If they consume our galaxy, they will look for others. Eventually they will find Earth. The logic was sound but terrifying. Asking the humans for help meant admitting that the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy could not protect themselves from destruction. "What do we know about their current capabilities?" asked Senator Morvek. Zektar brought up more recent data. Long-range observations show they have colonized several worlds in their system. They have built space stations and developed faster-than-light communication. Most importantly, they have been testing weapons that we do not understand. What kind of weapons? Kinetic bombardment systems, chemical warfare agents, biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers, and something they call psychological warfare that seems to focus on breaking enemy morale. The chamber fell silent again. The idea of humans with advanced technology was frightening enough. The idea of needing their help was almost unthinkable. "If we contact them," Vexani said slowly, "what guarantee do we have that they won't turn on us afterward?" "None," Zektar admitted. "But if we don't contact them, we have a guarantee that the Void Wraiths will destroy everything we have built." The debate continued for hours. Some delegates argued for evacuation to distant galaxies. Others wanted to make a final stand with their remaining forces. A few suggested surrender, though no one knew if the Void Wraiths would accept it. Finally, Vexani called for order. "We will put this to a vote. All in favor of contacting the human species and requesting military assistance?" Hands, claws, tentacles, and appendages rose slowly around the chamber. The count was close, but the motion passed. "The motion carries," Vexani announced. "May the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to do." As the council session ended, Zektar remained at the podium, staring at the images of destroyed worlds. In a few days, he would send a message to the most feared species in the galaxy, asking them to save everyone else. He wondered if they would laugh at the request, or if they would see it as an opportunity to expand their own territory, or if they would simply ignore the message entirely. But deep in his mind, he feared something else entirely. He feared that the humans would agree to help, and that the cure might prove worse than the disease. The message went out the next day, transmitted on primitive radio frequencies toward the Sol system. It would take weeks to reach Earth, and longer, for any response to come back. In the meantime, the Void Wraiths continued their advance, consuming everything in their path, growing stronger with each victory. The galaxy's last hope now rested with the species they had spent centuries trying to avoid. Dr. Helen Carter was studying deep space radio signals when the message came through. She had been working the night shift at the Deep Space Communication Center on Luna Station, listening to the usual background noise of the cosmos. Then something different appeared on her screens. The signal was weak but clearly artificial. It came from outside the solar system, transmitted on frequencies that Earth had been using for decades, but the content made her hands shake as she decoded it. "Captain Rodriguez," she called to the station commander. "You need to see this immediately." Captain Luis Rodriguez was a veteran of the Mars colonial wars, a man who had seen enough combat to stay calm under pressure. But as he read the decoded message, his face went pale. "They want us to join some kind of galactic war?" he asked. Helen nodded. "According to this, there are hundreds of alien civilizations out there. They've been fighting something called the Void Wraiths for months, and they're losing badly." The message was crude, transmitted in basic mathematical concepts and simple pictures, but its meaning was clear. The galaxy was under attack by an enemy that consumed everything in its path. Entire star systems had been destroyed. Billions of lives had been lost. "Why are they contacting us?" Rodriguez wondered aloud. A second transmission arrived an hour later. This one contained more detailed information, including military analysis and tactical assessments. The aliens had been watching Earth for a long time, studying human warfare and technology. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the station's tactical officer, read through the files with growing amazement. "They think we're the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They've cataloged every major war in human history going back thousands of years. The alien assessment was thorough and disturbing. They had recorded human tactics from ancient battles to modern conflicts. They knew about chemical weapons, biological warfare, nuclear strategies, and psychological operations. They had studied human military doctrine and found it unlike anything else in the galaxy. They're afraid of us, Rodriguez realized. That's why they've never made contact before. But now they need us, Helen added. This enemy they're fighting has adapted to all their conventional weapons and tactics. They think human military thinking might be different enough to work. The implications were staggering. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they discovered not only that they weren't alone, but that they were considered the most feared species among hundreds of civilizations. Rodriguez made the decision to forward the message to Earth Command. Within hours, the response came back. Admiral Kate Sullivan would lead a small task force to make first contact with the aliens. Admiral Sullivan was a hard woman who had earned her rank through years of brutal combat. She had commanded fleets during the asteroid belt conflicts and had never lost a major engagement. If anyone could handle first contact with potentially hostile aliens, it was her. The human task force consisted of 3 ships. The exploration vessel Aurora carried the scientific team. The research ship Discovery held the technical specialists. The diplomatic cruiser Unity served as the command vessel. They met the aliens in neutral space, far from any inhabited system. The alien ship was massive, 10 times larger than all 3 human vessels combined. Its design was elegant and clearly advanced, with energy shields and weapons that Earth's technology couldn't match. Remember, Admiral Sullivan told her senior staff, we're not here to make friends. We're here to figure out if this benefits humanity. The alien representative appeared on their main screen as a 3-dimensional hologram. He was tall and reptilian, with green scales and large golden eyes. His movements were precise and formal. Greetings, humans of Sol 3, the alien said. I am Ambassador Zektar, speaking for the Galactic Council. We come to you in our time of greatest need. Admiral Sullivan leaned forward in her command chair. Skip the diplomatic talk, Ambassador. Your message said you've been watching us. You know what we're capable of. What do you want? Zektar seemed surprised by her directness. Most species in the galaxy used elaborate courtesy protocols. We require your assistance in a war against an enemy that threatens all life in our galaxy. And what do we get in return? Membership in the Galactic Council, access to advanced technologies, trade relationships with thousands of worlds, knowledge that could advance your civilization by centuries. Sullivan's tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks, studied the technical specifications the aliens had provided. Their faster-than-light drives, energy weapons, and defensive systems were far beyond anything humanity had developed. Tell us about this enemy, Dr. Carter said from her position at the science station. The holographic display changed, showing images of the void wraiths. They looked like living shadows constantly shifting and changing shape. Their ships were organic, more like giant creatures than constructed vessels. They consume energy directly, Zektar explained. Our weapons feed them. Our shields make them stronger. They appear to be guided by a collective intelligence that learns from every battle. In 6 months, they have adapted to every strategy we have used. Biological ships, Brooks observed. That's why conventional weapons don't work. You're trying to kill something that's already adapted to survive in space. Exactly. But your species has extensive experience with biological warfare. Your military history shows the use of chemical weapons, environmental manipulation, and targeted genetic attacks. The statement hung in the air like an accusation. The aliens weren't just asking for help. They were asking humanity to teach them how to commit genocide. You want us to show you how to wipe out an entire species, Admiral, Sullivan said bluntly. We want you to show us how to survive. Zektar replied with equal directness. The negotiations continued for hours. The aliens offered detailed technical specifications for all their advanced systems. In return, they wanted human military advisors and complete access to Earth's military database. Colonel Amy Fisher, the task force intelligence officer, raised the obvious concern. If we share our military knowledge, what stops you from using it against us later? Zektar's expression grew grave. Because if the void wraiths are not stopped, there will be no later for any of us. They have consumed the outer territories of our galaxy. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds within 2 years. The holographic display showed the progression of the void wraith advance. System after system had gone dark, their populations consumed or destroyed. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Once they finish with our galaxy, Zektar continued, they will look for others. Your sol system will eventually be found and destroyed. Admiral Sullivan considered the situation carefully. The aliens clearly had superior technology, but they were losing a war against an enemy that fed on their own weapons. Humanity's reputation for brutal warfare might be exactly what was needed. We'll need to see this threat firsthand, she decided. And we want full access to your intelligence on enemy capabilities. Agreed. We will provide you with liaison officers and complete diplomatic credentials. But I must warn you, Admiral, once you see what we face, you will understand why we came to the most feared species in the galaxy for help. The meeting ended with a formal agreement. Humanity would provide military assistance in exchange for advanced technology and galactic citizenship. But both sides knew the real question remained unanswered. Could human brutality succeed where galactic civilization had failed? And if it did, would the cure prove worse than the disease? As the alien ship departed, Admiral Sullivan stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an enemy was consuming entire worlds. Soon, humanity would either save the galaxy or confirm every alien's worst fears about the species from Earth. The war was about to begin. The Joint Task Force arrived at the Kepler defense line 3 days later. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the alien command ship Eternal Vigilance, watching hundreds of vessels arrange themselves in perfect formations. The alien fleet moved with precision that impressed even experienced human officers. Your formations look good, she told Commander Kylos, the blue-skinned hegemony officer in charge of sector defense, but they're too predictable. Commander Kylos looked confused. His large eyes blinked slowly as he processed her words. These formations have been used successfully for centuries, Admiral. They are proven tactical doctrine. Against conventional enemies, Colonel Fisher pointed out. But you told us these void wraiths adapt to everything you throw at them. Dr. Carter had been studying the energy readings from previous battles. The data showed patterns that worried her. Commander Kylos, every time you fire your weapons, you're telling the enemy exactly where you are and what you're planning to do next. I do not understand, Kylos replied. Lieutenant Morrison pulled up tactical displays from recent engagements. Look at these battle records. The void wraiths aren't just absorbing your weapon energy. They're reading the electromagnetic signatures of your ships. Every shot you fire gives them more information about your capabilities. The conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the command ship. Long-range sensors had detected an incoming void wraith fleet. They were moving faster than any previous attack, arriving hours ahead of schedule. All ships, assume defensive. Formation Theta 7, Commander Kylos ordered immediately. Admiral Sullivan watched the alien fleet organize itself into the same patterns they had been using throughout the war. Neat rows of ships perfectly spaced with heavy cruisers in the center and lighter vessels on the flanks. Cancel that order, she said firmly. Kylos turned to stare at her. Admiral, with respect, you do not have command authority in this sector. Then, consider this advice from someone who's won every battle she's ever fought. Sullivan replied coldly. Your defensive formation is exactly what they're expecting. You're making their job easy. The Void Wraith fleet emerged from hyperspace in a formation unlike anything the aliens had seen before. Instead of the usual wave assault, the enemy ships formed a complex three-dimensional pattern that surrounded the defense line from multiple directions simultaneously. How did they know our positioning? Kylos asked in shock. Because you've been using the same playbook for months, Colonel Fisher answered. They've had plenty of time to study your tactics. Every battle has been a learning experience for them. The enemy ships began their approach. Up close, they were even more disturbing than the holographic images had suggested. The Void Wraith vessels looked like giant sea creatures swimming through space. Their hulls pulsed with dark energy, and tentacle-like appendages writhed along their sides. The alien defenders opened fire according to their established protocols. Brilliant energy beams and explosive projectiles filled the space between the fleets. The light show was impressive, but the results were exactly what Admiral Sullivan had expected. The Void Wraith ships absorbed the incoming fire like sponges soaking up water. Their hull organisms grew visibly larger and more aggressive as they fed on the energy. Some of the enemy vessels actually moved closer to the heaviest fire, seeking more power to consume. "Sir," Morrison called out urgently, "I'm reading massive energy spikes from the enemy vessels. They're preparing to return fire." When the Void Wraiths fired back, their weapons cut through alien shields and armor like they were made of paper. Ship after ship exploded or went dark as the enemy beams found their targets. Admiral Sullivan made a command decision. "All human vessels, implement Chaos Protocol 7. Do not coordinate with alien fleet movements." The 3 human ships broke formation immediately. Instead of following the neat patterns the aliens used, they moved in seemingly random directions. The Aurora dove under the main battle line. The Discovery climbed above it. The Unity weaved between friendly and enemy ships in a pattern that looked completely insane. "What are they doing?" Kylos demanded. "They're ignoring all tactical doctrine. They're being unpredictable," Dr. Carter realized as she watched the human ships work. The Void Wraith's advantage comes from their ability to anticipate enemy actions, but humans have built their entire military philosophy around chaos and adaptation. The human ships didn't engage the main enemy fleet directly. Instead, they targeted specific parts of individual Void Wraith vessels, using weapons the aliens had never seen before. Kinetic projectiles that punched through hulls, electromagnetic pulse devices that disrupted biological functions, chemical explosives that burned through organic armor. Lieutenant Commander Brooks had identified something important about the enemy ships. "Admiral, the Void Wraiths are showing signs of system failure when exposed to rapidly changing energy frequencies. They can adapt to sustained attacks but not to constant variation." "Then let's give them more variation than they can handle," Sullivan ordered. "All ships implement random frequency modulation on all weapon systems. No sustained fire on any single target." The human attack continued with controlled chaos. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy ships outright, they were systematically disrupting their biological functions. Every few seconds they changed weapons, frequencies, and targeting priorities. The effect on the Void Wraiths was dramatic. Their ships began to convulse and twist as their adaptation systems overloaded. Some enemy vessels actually turned on each other, their collective intelligence confused by the contradictory data it was receiving. "Remarkable," Commander Kylos breathed as he watched the battle unfold. "In 6 months of warfare, this is the first time the enemy has shown signs of confusion." The alien fleet, taking courage from the human example, began to modify their own tactics. Ships broke formation and started using irregular attack patterns. Instead of coordinated volleys, they began firing at random intervals with varying weapon types. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. The Void Wraiths, designed to learn and counter specific threats, couldn't process the constantly changing attack patterns. Their collective intelligence became more erratic as contradictory information flooded their network. Within an hour, something unprecedented happened. The Void Wraith fleet began to retreat. Ships that had never shown fear or uncertainty turned away from the battle and fled back into hyperspace. The alien crews cheered as the enemy disappeared. For the first time since the war began, they had achieved a clear victory. But Admiral Sullivan remained focused on the tactical implications. "They'll be back," she told Kylos, "and they'll have adapted to these tactics too. We need to stay ahead of their learning curve." "How do we do that?" Kylos asked. "By being more unpredictable than they can possibly anticipate," Colonel Fisher replied. "By fighting a war that doesn't follow any rules they can learn." Dr. Carter was already analyzing the battle data. "The key is constant variation. As long as we never repeat the same tactic twice, their adaptation systems can't keep up." Admiral Sullivan nodded grimly as she studied the sensor readings from the retreating enemy fleet. "We just proved that the Void Wraiths can be beaten. Now we need to teach the entire galaxy how to fight like humans." The real war was about to begin, and for the first time since the Void Wraiths had appeared, the galaxy had reason to hope. But hope came with a price. To defeat their enemy, every civilized species would have to learn to fight like the most uncivilized species of all. They would have to become human. 3 weeks after the victory at Kepler Line, Admiral Sullivan stood before the entire Galactic Council. The massive assembly hall contained representatives from over 300 species, all watching the small group of humans at the central platform. The chamber was quiet except for the soft humming of translation devices. Every delegate knew why they were there. The humans had done something no one else had managed in 6 months of war. They had made the Void Wraiths retreat. Honored delegates, Admiral Sullivan began, her voice carrying clearly through the halls. Sound systems. You asked us here because you were losing a war. After studying your enemy and your methods, I can tell you exactly why you were failing. The holographic display behind her showed battle analysis comparing human military history with recent galactic engagements. The differences were stark and disturbing. Every species in this galaxy fights war the same way, she continued. You create rules, establish standard tactics, and rely on better technology to win. This works against normal enemies, but the Void Wraiths are not normal. Elder Counselor Vexani leaned forward from her crystal throne. What do you propose, Admiral? Complete change, Sullivan replied without hesitation. You need to forget everything you think you know about warfare and start fighting like humans do. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. The idea of adopting human military doctrine terrified species that had spent thousands of years developing civilized approaches to conflict. Dr. Carter stepped forward to explain the scientific reasoning. The Void Wraiths are a collective intelligence with rapid adaptation capabilities. They learn from every battle and adjust their responses accordingly. But this strength is also their weakness. She activated a new display showing biological analysis of captured Void Wraith tissue. They're designed to process and counter specific threats, but their adaptation takes time and requires consistent data. If we overwhelm their processing capacity with chaotic, unpredictable attacks, we can break their decision-making system. Commander Thylos of the Avian Republic spoke up nervously. You're asking us to abandon our principles. War should be conducted with honor, following established codes of conduct. Honor won't save your worlds, Colonel Fisher replied sharply. The Void Wraiths don't care about your codes. They care about survival and expansion. If you want to beat them, you need to use methods they can't predict or counter. Admiral Sullivan presented the human proposal in detail. Instead of large, fleet battles following predictable patterns, they recommended small unit tactics focused on harassment and sabotage. Rather than energy weapons that fed the enemy, they suggested kinetic and chemical weapons that caused physical damage. We need to hit them where they're not expecting it, Lieutenant Morrison explained, showing tactical projections. Supply, lines, communication nodes, breeding facilities. Make them react to our moves instead of adapting to theirs. The most controversial part of the human plan involved psychological warfare. Captain Rodriguez, recently promoted to Fleet Command, outlined their analysis of Void Wraith behavior patterns. They operate as a collective consciousness, which means they share emotional responses across their entire species, he explained. If we can create fear, confusion, or panic in local groups, it will spread through their network and affect their strategic thinking. Ambassador Zektar looked troubled by the implications. You're asking us to terrorize them, to use their own psychology against them. We're asking you to win, Admiral Sullivan replied coldly. The Void Wraiths have been terrorizing this galaxy for months. It's time to give them a taste of their own medicine. The council debated for hours. Many delegates expressed serious concerns about adopting such aggressive tactics. The human approach to warfare went against everything their civilizations had, built over millennia of peaceful development. But the recent victory at Kepler Line had proven that human methods could work against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The choice was clear: adapt or die. Senator Morvek from the Trisolar Alliance raised a practical question. If we agree to this, how quickly can our forces be retrained? 6 months, Admiral Sullivan answered. We'll need to completely restructure your military command systems, Retrain your officers and rebuild your supply chains. It won't be easy, and it won't be comfortable. What about our existing weapons and ships? Asked Dr. Keln from the Hegemony Worlds. Most of your energy weapons will be scrapped, Colonel Fisher explained. We'll replace them with kinetic projectile systems, chemical explosives, and electromagnetic pulse devices. Your ship designs will need to emphasize speed and stealth over heavy armor. The transformation would be massive. Traditional fleet structures that had dominated galactic warfare for thousands of years would be replaced with flexible, independent unit operations. Finally, Elder Counselor Vexani called for a formal vote. All those in favor of implementing human military doctrine as our primary strategy against the Void Wraith threat? The voting was tense. Delegates whispered among themselves, weighing the risks of both options. Adopting human tactics meant abandoning their civilized approach to conflict, but refusing meant certain extinction. The final count was close, but the motion passed. Humanity would be given supreme military command of all galactic forces, with full access to resources and personnel across hundreds of worlds. Admiral Sullivan, Vexani announced formally, the Galactic Council hereby grants you complete military authority over all allied forces. May your species' reputation for warfare prove to be our salvation rather than our doom. As the Council session ended, Admiral Sullivan gathered her senior staff for immediate planning. The real work was just beginning, and time was running short. We have 6 months before the Void Wraiths regroup and launch their next major offensive, she told them. In that time, we need to transform the entire galactic military into something resembling human forces. Colonel Fisher smiled grimly as she reviewed the personnel reports. 3 million officers from 300 different species, all needing to learn human military doctrine. This should be interesting. The technology conversion will be the biggest challenge, Lieutenant Commander Brooks added. We're talking about scrapping weapon systems that took centuries to develop and replacing them with designs based on human warfare. Dr. Carter had been studying the psychological profiles of various alien species. Some of them are going to have serious problems with our methods. Many of these civilizations haven't fought a real war in thousands of years. Then they'll learn quickly, Admiral Sullivan replied without sympathy. The Void Wraiths won't give them time for gradual adjustment. Captain Rodriguez pulled up strategic projections showing Void Wraith movement patterns. Intelligence suggests they're massing for a major assault on the core worlds. If we can't get the new doctrine implemented before then, this whole effort will be pointless. The meeting continued through the night as human officers outlined training programs, equipment modifications, and tactical restructuring. Every aspect of galactic military organization would need to be changed. Remember, Admiral Sullivan told her staff as the session concluded, we're not just teaching them new tactics, we're teaching them to think like humans, to fight without honor, to use fear as a weapon and to accept casualties as the price of victory. Lieutenant Morrison looked out at the stars visible through the station's windows. Do you think they can do it? Can civilized species learn to be as brutal as we are? They'll learn, Sullivan replied grimly, or they'll die. And if they die, we'll be fighting the Void Wraiths alone. The transformation of the galaxy had begun. In 6 months, either the combined forces would be ready to face their enemy as equals, or the Void Wraiths would find a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight back. The clock was ticking, and humanity was about to teach the universe what real war looked like. 6 months later, the transformed Galactic Defense Force prepared for the largest military operation in galactic history. Admiral Sullivan stood in the command center of the massive fortress station Terra Nova, coordinating with fleet commanders across 17 star systems. The changes had been dramatic and shocking. Traditional energy weapons had been scrapped and replaced with kinetic projectile systems, chemical explosives, and electromagnetic pulse devices. Ship designs now emphasized speed and stealth over heavy armor. Most importantly, the rigid command structures that had dominated galactic warfare for thousands of years had been replaced with flexible, independent unit operations. Phase 1 units report ready for deployment, Captain Rodriguez announced, from his position at the tactical display. The screen showed hundreds of small strike groups positioned throughout the Void Wraith expansion zone. Admiral Sullivan addressed the assembled fleet commanders through holographic links. Remember your training. We're not trying to defeat them in traditional battle. We're going to make them afraid to leave their ships, afraid to expand, afraid to exist. The first wave of attacks began simultaneously across 50 systems. Instead of challenging the main Void Wraith fleets, human-led strike teams targeted isolated facilities, supply convoys, and communication networks. Each attack used different weapons and tactics, preventing the enemy from developing consistent countermeasures. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim led Strike Group 7 in their assault on the Arcturus system. Her mixed force of human and alien vessels descended on a Void Wraith breeding facility like wolves attacking a flock of sheep. Primary target acquired, she reported over the communication link. Beginning chemical bombardment. Her ships unleashed a coordinated barrage of incendiary weapons designed specifically to disrupt biological functions. The chemicals burned through the organic structures of the enemy facility, causing massive system failures throughout the complex. Breeding facility destroyed, Kim reported. Enemy response appears confused and uncoordinated. Similar reports came in from across the battlefront. Strike teams used everything from nuclear devices to biological weapons, hitting the Void Wraiths where they were weakest. Dr. Carter, now serving as Chief Scientific Advisor to the military command, monitored the psychological impact on the enemy collective consciousness. Enemy communication patterns show increased stress markers, she reported. From the main command center, their decision-making is becoming more erratic. The unpredictability of our attacks is overwhelming their adaptive capabilities. The second phase involved direct fleet engagement, but not in the way the galaxy had fought before. Instead of massive battles between organized fleets, human doctrine called for hit-and-run attacks using overwhelming force applied at specific points of enemy weakness. Commander Jake Harrison led the assault on the Void Wraith stronghold in the Vega system. His mixed fleet of alien and human vessels moved like a pack of predators, striking hard and fast before disappearing back into hyperspace. Target their command organisms first, he ordered his pilots. Disrupt their coordination, then hit them with everything we've got. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human fighters used suicide drones loaded with nuclear weapons, detonating them inside enemy ships to cause maximum internal damage. Alien vessels, retrained in human tactics, used ramming attacks and boarding parties to physically invade Void Wraith organisms. This is barbaric, muttered Commander Thylos, watching the battle feeds from the Fleet Command Center. This is effective, Colonel Fisher replied without emotion. Look at the casualty ratios. We're winning. And they were winning. For the first time since the war began, the Void Wraiths were being systematically defeated in direct combat. Their adaptive abilities, so effective against predictable alien tactics, couldn't cope with the chaotic creativity of human warfare. The psychological impact was equally devastating. Intercepted enemy communications showed growing fear and uncertainty within the Void Wraith collective. They had never encountered opponents who seemed to enjoy combat, who treated warfare as an art form rather than a necessary evil. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the stealth destroyer Phantom, specializing in infiltration and sabotage operations that bordered on terrorism. Her mission was to strike at the heart of Void Wraith territory, targeting their most protected installations. Primary target is their nursery worlds, she reported during a mission briefing. We're going to make them afraid to reproduce, afraid to build anything permanent. Her successful destruction of 3 major Void Wraith breeding colonies sent shockwaves through the enemy collective. The psychological warfare was working exactly as human doctrine predicted. The Void Wraiths were learning what it meant to be hunted. The third phase began when Void Wraith resistance started to collapse. Their once unified fleet began fragmenting into smaller groups, some attempting to flee the galaxy entirely, while others made desperate last stands in fortified systems. Admiral Sullivan coordinated the final assault from Terra Nova, watching as human-led forces systematically eliminated the remaining enemy strongholds. The aliens had learned their lessons well, fighting with a brutality that would have horrified their ancestors. Long-range sensors show massive enemy fleet movements toward the galactic rim, Lieutenant Morrison reported. They appear to be retreating. Pursuing. Fleeing enemies wastes resources, Colonel Fisher advised. Let them go. The important thing is that they're leaving. But Admiral Sullivan shook her head firmly. No. If we let them escape, they'll eventually adapt to our tactics and return stronger. Human doctrine is clear on this point. When you find an enemy that threatens your existence, you eliminate them completely. The final battle took place at the edge of known space, where the last major Void Wraith fleet made its stand. The engagement lasted 3 days and resulted in the complete destruction of enemy forces. No Void Wraith survivors were detected by any sensor system. 3 months after the final battle, Admiral Sullivan stood once again before the Galactic Council. But this time, she addressed a very different assembly. The war was over, the galaxy was safe, and humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Void Wraith threat has been eliminated, she announced to thunderous applause. The galaxy is secure. Elder Counselor Vexani rose to address the human delegation. Admiral Sullivan, on behalf of all civilized species, we thank you for your service. Humanity has proven itself to be not the most terrifying species in the galaxy, but its greatest protector. Admiral Sullivan smiled grimly. Don't mistake what happened here. We didn't become less terrifying. We just found an enemy more deserving of our attention than you were. The galaxy is safe now because we chose to make it safe. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Carter reflected on what they had accomplished. Do you think they understand what we really did here? They understand that we won a war they couldn't win, Admiral Sullivan replied. Whether they understand the cost or what it means for the future is less important. And what does it mean for the future? Colonel Fisher asked. Admiral Sullivan looked out at the stars, where human ships now patrolled alongside alien vessels, maintaining the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. It means we're no longer just the most dangerous species in the galaxy, she said quietly. We're also its guardians. The question isn't what that cost us. The question is what we do with that responsibility. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, carrying with them the technology and knowledge gained from their galactic allies, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species from Sol 3. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most terrifying creatures in the universe are the ones willing to fight for something greater than themselves. The stars themselves seemed brighter, knowing that Earth's children were watching over them. The war was over, but humanity's role as galactic protector had just begun.